All right. Okay. Good evening. Okay, we'll wait another 30 seconds so that everyone who is joining in will be able to join in on time, and then we'll get started. Yeah. Hey. Just a quick check. Just to make sure all technicals are working fine. Okay, so you'll be able to see my screen, hear my audio as well, right? So if things are good, just type OK and then let me know, and then we'll get started. Hey, good. Okay, so we'll get started for today's session. Okay, this is our second time running this over here. Last week was the first one, and then we had some technical issues. So we're gonna continue running this on a regular basis every Monday. Same time around 9:30 p.m. And the whole idea of this is to share with you on a weekly basis what are some of the opportunities, some of the events that you want to take note of for the particular week. Okay, so quick disclaimer over here, everything we're gonna cover today in this session over here are for educational purposes. We're gonna talk about some opportunities, some of the ideas that I'm personally looking out for this week. Okay, so hopefully, of course, right, those ideas would turn into profitable opportunities, but just make sure you know, okay, that trading involves risks, and you need to have a sound strategy, a proper strategy, coupled with stringent risk management to approach the market, okay? And everything we share here is not considered as a financial advice, okay? So just a quick disclaimer to put off, okay? Good. So overall structure for today's session gonna be similar, throughout all the sessions that we're gonna run every Monday. But for those of you who are here first time, just want to give you an overall structure so that you know the flow for today's session. Okay, so I'm gonna summarize very quickly what happened last week. What are some of the economic events that you want to take note for this week? And then we'll look into the technical charts, go through some of the opportunities, some of the major pairs that have the obvious opportunities to focus on. And then we'll end off, with a quick answering session. So if you have some questions, some particular instrument that you'd like me to share, or an idea, my analysis or perspective, just type it into the chat, right? We'll answer a couple of questions each week as well. Now I do my best to try and put this session within somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes. I wouldn't want to drag it too long as well. I would rather focus to be concise, straight to the point, and obviously, right, wouldn't want to waste everyone's time, by dragging things. Okay, so that's the whole idea. And this is what we're gonna run throughout. Okay, every Monday. Yeah, so let's get started with that by looking at last week's event calendar, okay, to give you a good summary of what happened last week. Last week over here, we have a couple of events, right? So if you scroll through from Friday up, we have quite a bit of things happening, mainly on Thursday. FOMC, Bank of Japan, etc. Okay. So overall, I think that the primary thing that you want to at least be aware of is that most major banks actually does hike rate. The one thing that moved the market most significantly was actually the pound. Okay, but some of you might be surprised, like, hey, how come the Bank of England actually raised rates, but the pound actually did a sell off? If you look at Friday, what actually happened was Bank of England actually stepped in and say that they're gonna do a tax cut, okay, and that kind of triggered. Sorry, that's not that week. Okay? That was over here, right? Sorry, Friday. In my events calendar, let me refresh it a little bit. Okay. So that was last Friday over here. We had a little bit of the pound drop and then the rally. Okay, so just to summarize what happened, was the Bank of England actually said and announced that they want to do a tax cut. But after that, that sent the pound dropping, right? But after that, they kind of U-turn and reverses, a little bit of their opinion and say that, oh, hold on, maybe we're not gonna do that. And that's what causes the pound to actually rally back up pretty strong. Okay. And last week over here on Friday, we have the US Core PCE Price Index coming in at 0.6. Again, that sent the dollar a little bit to the upside, but not significant. Okay, so later we'll take a look at the charts to share with you where my perspective and the direction I want to focus on the dollar index for this week itself. Okay, so fundamentally, just to share with you that there's a good chance the dollar will gonna continue strengthening, at least in the long-term perspective. When I mean long-term is somewhere between like 1 month to a quarter's period of time. So if you're looking at it from now until the end of the year, there's a good chance the dollar can continue to strengthen. But nothing is going to move in one direction all the time, right? So there's a good chance that what we're seeing right now in the dollar is that we're having a kind of retracement, a slight pause. But who knows, right? Maybe the following week, next week or the following week, we're going to see the dollar strengthening back up again. Okay. Yeah, so just now there was a slight problem with my Forex Factory. It went all the way to the previous week as well. So last week was pretty quiet. Okay, I think the main part is really the pound, right? So we had like a massive drop, and then last week the pound recovered very, very strongly. This week, okay, the focus goes back to some of the commodities, currencies like Aussie. Tomorrow we have the cash rate. Wednesday we have the RBNZ. Okay, and then on Friday, of course, we have the CAD as well as the NFP, which is our usual, first Friday of the month, and sort of, okay. I don't think that the Aussie RBA and RBNZ is gonna create much movement and volatility in the market. There's unlikely gonna be much of a surprise from these two banks, so do take note of those events, but unlikely it's gonna create huge volatility. Okay. Friday NFP, I don't think is gonna be a major one. If you're interested in trading that particular event, I would say more emphasis would be placed on the average hourly earnings, because that is gonna have an impact in inflationary pressure. Unemployment rate and NFP, not that crucial at this moment, right? So that's why I don't think NFP is going to be a major movement for the dollar as well. A Canadian, okay, from the past few months to like 1 year, the employment and unemployment rate data from Canadian tends to give us some very nice opportunity to do news trading. Because most of the time when the data comes out and it's, there's a great deviation, whether is it surprisingly to the good side or surprisingly to the downside. The movement in Canadian tends to be quite clear. Okay, so you don't get a lot of like whipsaw and things like that. So if you're more towards news trading, right, you can pay attention to that, because this data comes in once a month and usually provides some decent volatility in the market. Right? So that's on the CAD side, right? So if you're interested in news trading, I think Friday focus a little bit more on the CAD. Yeah, so that's about it for the news. Really nothing much, okay, to focus such that you can create much volatility. Yeah. Okay, so with that, let's jump to the technical portion for this week here. There are a couple of opportunities I'm looking at. I'm focusing for the week. But let's start off with the dollar index first. Okay. I'm looking mainly in a forward time frame, which means that I'm more of a swing style of trader. And what I'm sharing over here with you at the start of the week is based on what we are seeing right now. Okay, but you need to also be aware that things can change accordingly, depend on how the market develop on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, right? So the directional bias that I'm sharing now is based on what we're seeing now, okay? Of course, it's relevant. I do my best to have it as relevant as possible throughout the week, which means what we're sharing here potentially can last you in terms of like now until Friday, okay? But just be aware that things can change quite quickly in the market. Okay, so dollar index for the short term within this week, I'm actually bearish on it. Okay, so fundamental from the dollar perspective is still bullish. Okay, in the long run, I'm still interested in looking at upside for the dollar. But this week here, I think we have a short-term opportunity to be selling the dollar itself. Okay, the reason for that is because from a technical point of view, when price hits 114.80, it gave us a pretty sharp rejection. I call this an impulse move. Right now, it seems to be developing a little bit of a flag, right? A little bit of a correction sideways move. Usually, this means more downside. Though we have the 50 and 618 Fibonacci over there, which again is not going to be like a massive drop. But within the week, look for sell opportunity mainly on the dollar. Okay, so some downside potential over here. Okay, now that's gonna open up some opportunity like euro dollar. Okay, if we can get a little bit of a flat pattern here, short term we can look for upside. Again, we have the 50 and 618 over here. So that would be your primary target. Okay, not like a huge massive move, but if you're looking at intraday, there's still that little bit of room and upside that you can capitalize on. Okay, so this is on the euro dollar. Not something that I would really pay too much attention, but it's still valid. Okay, what I'm more interested in is actually the pound dollar for this week. This is gonna come in on the more on the 1 hour scale. It's more obvious on the 1 hour chart. Okay, so we have a little bit of a channel. Very nice. Price is respecting that channel very nicely. Elliott Wave perspective, we have this as a 1, 2, 3. We have a little bit of a diagonal, a crawl pattern here as well. If you bring in your RSI, you'll see a divergence. So I'm looking at a reversal, okay, because we're at the top of the channel. We have this reversal pattern. We have a completed 3 wave. Quite a bit of different elements is suggesting downside. Okay, obviously I'm not selling now, but I'm actually deploying a breakout entry technique. Okay, so my focus here is to wait for price to break 1.1080. That would be like the confirmation level. And then 1.1280 becomes a potential stop loss in place, right? So it's about 200 pips. My final target will be back at its previous low around 1.0365. I would be cautious when the market actually decides to drop and come and retest the bottom of this channel. If I were to extend it a bit, okay, price might react here and still go back up. So again, as I mentioned, you need to track and observe how the market develop as it progress, right? So do keep an eye on how the market is reacting in the bottom of the channel. But if you can get a nice little breakthrough, then there's a good possibility we're going to see market reaching for 1.0365, and then this will be a pretty decent sell trade opportunity. Okay, that's on the pound dollar. Definitely one pair that I would suggest to add it into your watch list as well. And then I have the Aussie dollar here in the 1 hour as well. But do be aware on Aussie dollar because we have the RBA tomorrow, right? So it's really hard to determine like what's going to happen, okay? Because such a major event can really shift the direction overnight, okay? So as of now, based on what we're seeing, at least we have this as a potential 1, 2, and then this is developing. Okay, and then again, very similar to the pound dollar, we have this very nice little channel here. So I'm expecting a bit more upside. Again, depending on whether tomorrow news is going to give us that momentum push to the upside or not. yeah, so be aware, right? Between pound dollar and Aussie dollar, I would say pound dollar is a little bit safer. I'm a little bit more confident about that setup. Aussie dollar over here, I'm a little bit of a mix, right? So if you're more conservative, I would personally avoid trading this because we don't really have a clear setup now, and then tomorrow we have the news already. Unless your strategy that you are using, okay, give you a valid entry, then by all means, right? If not, from my style, I'm more inclined to focus on the pound. Okay, so that's one. And then we have, I'm also looking at the dollar Canadian. This is a little bit back to the 4-hour chart perspective. Okay, the dollar CAD has been consolidating throughout for the last 1 week. Didn't really move much, right? This entire piece here that you see was last week's movement. So I'm a little bit bearish on this as long as the price is able to, get rejected off that 1.3830. I'm expecting this downside, right? Why is because most of the time when the market actually had a very huge run like that, especially in the FX market, it tends to do a little bit of a pullback, right? Because so far from this bottom to this high, we don't really have a very clear pullback. Most of the time, the market will do it. So that's where I'm anticipating a little bit of a pullback. But again, I don't have a very clear sell for the week. It's just more of like the direction that it's clear for me to focus is on the downside. So if you again have your own individual strategy that tells you to sell, gives you a valid sell signal, you can look out for it. Okay, I'm not expecting a major reversal on this, but potential level here is somewhere around like 1.35 to like 1.34. That would be the 38.2 and 50% Fibonacci area. Okay, so those are the retracement levels that you can keep an eye on for the short term. Okay, and then we have, for me, Aussie Yen. Okay, this one here, if you look at the daily chart first, we have a very clear diagonal pattern. Okay, what I like about this is really that nice triple touch at the top, respecting that trend line. And the market is currently kind of developing at the bottom of this structure, right? So most of the time when we see three tops, it does suggest that, okay, this diagonal is likely completed. It's ready to take off. And then it's currently developing looking like a corrective structure now. Okay? So that brings me to start focusing on a potential sell for the week. Okay, so whether are we gonna see this drop within this week, or we might need to wait until next week. We want to see how the market develops. Now this is a little bit small to me. So if let's say this comes back down a little bit, this goes back up a little bit, maybe by the end of the week, this one here you can see, right, 7th of October, right? So by the time we are around 7th of October, which is 4 days from now, which is Friday, and the market kind of develops in a very, very slow manner, somewhere around this zone will be a very decent sell opportunity. Okay, if the market just decide to go up tomorrow because of RBA, I don't think it's a good idea to be selling yet. Okay, because it's a little bit too small to be a corrective pattern. So you need to have that time element as well. Okay, so for me, Aussie Yen, if I want to take a sell, I want it to develop by Thursday or Friday. So I'm not in a rush. I want to wait until Thursday and Friday to see if I get a valid entry. Okay, so that's where the time element kicks in, right? So Aussie Yen, you can start paying attention to that for the week. And then I have Canadian Yen. Okay, so Canadian Yen is actually very, very similar on the daily, right? We kind of have this 1, 2, 3. Same thing, very diagonal-like looking, and the market is consolidating at the bottom of this trend line. So again, we're expecting downside. Okay, CAD Yen, I've actually started looking at it since last week, but last week is doing this, nothing much. So this week here, nothing has changed. My direction is due to the downside. My entry is still basically the break of this low around 105, 104.55. The stop here will be around 106.05, right? So if the market goes up a little bit and then comes back down, nothing changed, right? So this is still corrective. So definitely you want to keep an eye on CAD Yen, right? So to me, based on the FX side of things, the two most obvious one that I'm currently looking out for will be the pound dollar to sell, okay, and the CAD Yen to sell. This two I think is the clearest of all. The rest that I mentioned just now, probably you need to just monitor and according to your strategy, whether you get a valid entry. Okay, but to me, pound yen and pound dollar and CAD Yen are the two that I would suggest. Definitely you will have it into your watch list. Okay. Gold here, last week we have a pretty decent rejection. So for me right now, I'm actually holding on to a little bit of a bullish direction, but I want to wait for a pullback, right? Again, this pullback might take time, might take until maybe beginning of next week. It might not be a trade this week. The earliest again might happen is maybe on Friday, but to me, I feel likelihood of that happening is very, very low. And this week here, for me, probably nothing. Okay, but I just want to share with you the overall analysis is upside, and if the market is able to clear off this trend line here that I've drawn, maybe a pullback, and then a break above it, that would tell me, or I would say that would give me a very clear confirmation that gold can likely head higher, right? And if I go back to the daily time frame, if I move that text away, okay, if this can start to take off, your upside is going to be huge. Okay, so definitely one of the pair you want to have it in your watch list. If not this week, likely is going to be next week. Okay, very similar here is crude oil. Okay, quite similar structure. You can see here bearish channel. So daily chart perspective, there is a huge upside that we can look out for. If this breaks through that channel, consolidate, and this opens up, huge upside momentum. Okay, so crude oil and gold, again, things to focus on. You might not get an entry set up. I mean, I might not get an entry set up this week. Maybe next week. Okay, but these two things here on the commodities, you want to start tracking it. Okay. Equity side of things, S&P. The market just opened recently. Not much of a move here. From an Elliott Wave perspective, we have come down towards this 1, 2, 3 extension. From the high here, 1, 2, 3. We have a little bit of a crawl pattern, a diagonal pattern, which suggests lacking of momentum to downside and a potential reversal. So if you're trading the indices, I would suggest at this moment, if you're more of a counter trend trader, you can look for a short-term retracement back up. If you are looking at a trend following technique, be patient, don't sell it first, right? The overall trend from this scale is still downwards, is still bearish, but we are already at a key zone and we can't expect a little bit of pullback. So it's not the best time to be selling. But as I mentioned, if you're a counter trend, this is the best time to look for it. Okay. If you recognize patterns, right, essentially you can see that, okay, this one here looks pretty similar, right? I mean, not exactly the same, but pretty similar, and you can see how that tends to react. Okay, so this is what we are anticipating here. Okay, not huge rally, but this is something for counter trend traders you can capitalize on. Okay, and then similar part here is how you can capitalize on that. You can actually play around with a breakout, but obviously this, this crawl is not as decent as this. This is very clear 1 time, 2 time breakout. You don't really get that here. Okay, but the principles are the same. Okay, so that's on indices, S&P. Bitcoin, crypto, Ethereum, this week, nothing. Okay, so I would suggest just don't get distracted by crypto for now, for this week. focus on some other things like as I mentioned, gold, oil, pound dollar, as well as the Aussie and cat yen. Okay, so those are the ones you want to pay a little bit more attention. Cool. Yeah, so those are the things that I'm looking at this moment based on what the chart is telling me for now, for today. Okay. Again, you don't need a lot of things. I always highlight this. We want to focus more on those that provide us with very clear setup, very clear direction, very clear pattern. We rather look at quality compared to quantity. Okay, so hopefully those so far helps, right? Give you some idea onto it. Okay, yeah. So with that, let's go into that Q&A section and see if you guys have any question. Okay. I'm seeing a bit here already. Let me take this question from Ibrahim. Okay, Ibrahim asks, please check on GJ. I think it's running the same pattern with pound dollar. Let's take a look at it. Yeah. Okay. In a way, you are right. Okay, this one looks like it's similar to the pound dollar. We have this 1, 2, 3 here as well. Yeah, so this suggests also downside over here, but there is some slight difference between the pound yen and the pound dollar, right? So if you take a look at the pound yen, right, in terms of how much did this move compared to this, is almost 100%. Okay, so this drop and this up move is almost equal in magnitude. Okay, versus that slight difference over here, the pound dollar, right, actually had an overall bearish momentum. Okay, so that slight difference helped me to filter off the pound yen, and rather I focus on the pound dollar. Obviously both setups are valid. You can take both, but also you need to understand in terms of the exposure, because if you trade both to the downside, and what happens if like pound just decide to strengthen, then both position might get into a losing one. So usually I like to then filter off and pick one that I'm more confident in. Okay, and to me, pound dollar is something that I'm more confident in compared to the pound yen. Okay, but that's my personal preference. Yeah. Overall, you can see pound yen is not really that clear in that overall structure and trend as compared to pound dollar. Okay, so that's where I focus on pound dollar. Good. Okay, I see another question over here. Pound Kiwi rallied almost 2,000 pips. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, probably right. Almost right. If you really take from the bottom, okay, just measure this, right, from the very bottom around 1.81, to this is almost like 1,800. Okay, it's definitely a very huge move, right? It's not a small move. All right. From the very bottom to the very top is a 10% move in the currency itself. That is huge. Okay, that is huge. Yeah, you seldom see that, but again, pound New Zealand, euro New Zealand, pound odd, euro odd, this kind of crosses are very volatile during normal circumstances already. And obviously last week and the following week we have a couple of pound news that move the market. Okay. Yeah, so just be aware of that, right? And the reason for me like totally not looking at all this movement here is really because you can see how it just ends off right now on the chart with an impulse move, right? So we just get a very strong move and then that's about it. So most of the time when I see a very strong move in the market, I like to give it some time to further develop. Then only I come back and take a look, okay, what pattern has it turned into? Okay, because if all it does is just a very strong move up like that or very strong move down like that, there's nothing really I can capitalize on it. Okay, I wouldn't want to buy, I wouldn't want to sell. So basically, I'll stay out of it. Okay, so most of the crosses are doing that, right? If you take a look at Euro Odd, we have this. Euro Kiwi, we have this, right? And then we have Pound Odd and Pound Kiwi, rather similar. So nothing much on that. Cool. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. Good, quick one. Any more questions that you guys have? Okay, I see one question from Kumar here. Referring to the US news like today on PMI, if actual data is better than forecast, how will it impact on gold price? Okay. If you take a look at this here at 10, which is now, let me just refresh that. This PMI data is not a very significant one, right? Just to be aware of it as well, right? Not all red color news data on Forex Factory is going to create that movement in the market, right? So if you take a look at this here, the data comes in at 50.9, which is actually worse than the forecast. Most traders would naturally just jump into a conclusion that, oh, it's a bad data, the dollar is going to sell off. Not necessary, okay? What you need to understand is it's not just, oh, rate means important, rate number means bad, then you sell. Okay? You need to also understand, like, what exactly is this data? Is this data a very important one in the current context, or is, just a typical, normal data? Now, ISM manufacturing PMI is not a very crucial data that the Fed is really paying a lot of attention to that. So something like that, I wouldn't even consider, an event by itself. Okay. I wouldn't do a news trade out of this particular data. Okay. But whether the market will strengthen or weaken based on this, it's very hard to say. Okay, so I don't trade something just because there's one data coming in. If you're talking about gold specifically, just now I shared with you guys also, right, in terms of how I look at gold. I would want to wait for a setup. Okay, what is a setup to me? I need to see a corrective pullback. Now, can gold continue to just rally? The answer is obviously yes, right? It can just keep going, and then maybe it touches this and then it starts to do that. Okay, so maybe it's not going to come back down so low, but maybe, by the time next week it's going to be somewhere there, then I'll be looking at that trade slightly higher. Okay, but I need to first wait for this. Okay, if I don't see that, I don't have a trade for me. But of course, everyone's strategy is different, right? So if your strategy gives you a signal to buy, by all means, right? But my direction for gold is focus on upside. Okay. Okay, I see another question. How to determine if crude oil is strong or weak? If you go back to the fundamentals of things, they are basically demand and supply, right? So one way to understand crude oil from one angle is to look at the demand and the supply of it. And if you go to Forex Factory, you can actually look at there's this data that announces the crude oil inventory, right? So that's the supply side of things. This week here, I don't see it. Okay, but we do have a little bit of OPEC news, right? This might be important as well. But from a fundamental point of view, you look at the oil inventories, right? So that's supply. So back to the normal understanding, basic understanding of demand and supply. If supply increases, price drops. If supply drops, price increases, right? So that's one angle you can look out for it. And then of course you can also look at from the angle of a demand side coming from, like energy crisis. If there's a war outbreak, that pushes demand for crude oil. And then prices will also rally, right? So that's more of a fundamental perspective, looking at different factors that can push prices on oil, whether to make it strong or weak. From a technical point of view, you can't really determine the catalyst, but from a technical point of view, you can look for price patterns to suggest to you the probability of whether upside or downside, right? So it's very, very technical, right? So that's the part where for me, I combine a little bit of both. I understand the fundamentals. I naturally also look at the technicals. That's how I deal with it. Okay, so hopefully that helps. How can I identify an end of a trend? Okay, so I think Ibrahim asked this. There's a couple of ways to do it. Depend again on, are you more fundamentally driven or technically driven, right? I mean, fundamentally driven, then you need to look at the policies that central bank gives out, right? So for example, right now, the Fed is hiking, right? They're in a hiking process. At one point in time, they would start to say that, all right, we're not gonna hike it anymore, and maybe by then, we have recession, and they would start to talk about cutting rates. Okay, so there's this end of a hiking cycle, and then the start of a cutting cycle. That's where okay, the dollar trend is likely gonna be ending soon. Okay, so that's from a fundamental point of view. From a technical point of view, you look out for patterns, right? So if you take a look at like CAD Yen or Aussie Yen on a daily scale, this technical pattern here is signaling a potential shift in the trend, right? So it's also suggesting that, okay, the trend might be ending, and then we're looking for a counter trend. Okay, so again, depending on whether you are more comfortable with the fundamental perspective or the technical, but both approach does have ways to tell you a potential trend is ending. Okay. Another question I see over here from Kong. How did the US job reports affect the S&P? Now there's no direct relation between jobs and the equities, okay? But over here, equities, you need to understand more from a macro perspective, okay? I think that's the main driver for general stocks, okay? And right now, we know that the Fed is tightening, okay? Tightening means that they are hiking rates, right? They are cutting down QE. This usually suggests bad for stocks, right? And that's the reason why, if you take a look at the overall 22 trend for equities market, we're down. And a lot of debate ongoing is that, have we seen the bottom of S&P, or are we going to see more downside for equities? If you ask me, I say that there are more downside. Okay, why? Is because from a macro perspective, the Fed is still hiking now. And as long as the Fed is hiking, overall equities can still drop, right? So some time back, I did share, okay, you want to be very careful with buying aggressively into the equities market, because if I just draw in a trend line like that, there's a possibility we're gonna go up a little bit more, come back down. It might take a long time, and it might retest this bottom of the structure before a bigger move. And if you just do a quick projection, that's somewhere around 3,300 area, right? 3300. And we are trading around 3650 now. Okay, so that downside is still possible. Okay, so from an equities perspective, not so much about the jobs or labor data, okay? But if you're looking at stocks, looking at equities market, you need to look from a macro perspective. Okay, hopefully that helps. Yeah. Good. Okay, so yeah, hopefully today's session over here does give you a little bit of insights here and there. Okay, and then answering some of those questions hopefully give you some different perspective of the market as well. Good. Okay, so before we conclude today's session over here, let me very quickly bring you back to the PowerPoint slides. Okay, so for those of you who are not aware, this session over here, right, is actually organized and sponsored also by Zenfinix. And on top of the every week Monday session like this, we do have some upcoming events and some promotions together with Zenfinix as well. So upcoming events, do take note. Okay, as I mentioned, on top of our weekly analysis session like today, this coming Wednesday, which is the 5th of October, we do have a webinar, but though that webinar is going to be conducted in Chinese, right? So if you can understand Mandarin, you'd like to join in for this upcoming webinar, this is the part 2 of it. Part 1, we've done it. Feel free to contact Zenfinix, okay, and then they will let you know, how to register for it, and then pass you the link to join in for this Wednesday session. And then on the 16th of October, we're going to have an offline event, a workshop at Penang. This is based in Malaysia. Okay, sadly, if you're not based in Malaysia, you're not based in Penang, then it's very difficult for you to attend. So on 16th of October is going to be an English session from 2 to 6. And then on the 18th of October is going to also be in Penang. More specifically, it's in Bukit Mertajam. It's going to be in Chinese as well, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Okay, so if you're based in Penang, if you'd like to join in for this workshop, do reach out to Zenfinix as well, okay? For those of you who are currently watching on YouTube, okay, there is a link in the description box below that brings you to Zenfinix WhatsApp. If you click onto that link, it will lead you to the WhatsApp, and then you can just drop a message directly to them. If you're on Zoom, then I think you would probably have their contact already. So these are the upcoming events, and then if you want to follow some of the updates that Zenfinix would have, you can go over to your official Facebook page, Zenfinix Malaysia. Click the like, follow them, and make sure you click onto the notification button, okay, so that whenever they post something or any updates, you get a notification from Facebook. Okay. On top of that, together with them, I've decided to also provide this offer, okay, for those of you who wants to pick up trading, more specifically on FX. You want to equip yourself with a holistic education covering the fundamental analysis, technical analysis, sentiment analysis, and risk management. I call it the 4 trading pillars. Today, you can actually get this masterclass for free, and all you have to do, hey, is to just register for your own Zenfinix account today, get it verified, make a small deposit of $500, and you'll be able to get access to this trading four trading pillars masterclass. Now, on top of that, in October, Zenfinix is currently running a deposit bonus as well, which means if you put in a $500 deposit, okay, you're gonna get an extra 150 credit bonus that you can use for trading, okay, and this is only applicable in October. Those of you who joined in on September, the amount was actually 200, okay, so there was a reduction this month. I'm not sure if November they're gonna have it anymore, so if this is something that you are interested in, I would suggest you want to take action quickly to leverage on some of these bonuses that they have as well. So how to do this, you again click on the WhatsApp link, inquiry more from Zenfinix directly. They will let you know more information about all these things that I've covered, and then from there, if you're ready, then just follow accordingly, and you'll be able to get this trading masterclass for free, okay, no extra charges, nothing. Good. So that's all from me for today. I hope you enjoy this session, okay, and I hope the live analysis over there does give you some ideas as to what you want to focus for the week. And all the best to your trading, and I always say, do remember to manage your risks, and I'll see you guys in those respective events itself, okay, and if not, then I'll see you next Monday, okay. So that's all. Hey, all the best, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Yeah, bye bye.